everyone. I'm being joined right now by the director of the film One to One, John and Yoko, Academy Award winner Kevin Macdonald. Kevin, it's such a pleasure to have you here on the show to talk about this really fascinating doc.
Lovely to be here. Yeah, it's an unusual documentary, isn't it? It's not like anything I've done before, and I've done a lot of music docs before.
I was going to say, you have expertise in this field, so it's not surprising to me that when you found out about the full-length restored benefit concert that John and Yoko performed together, that it caught your interest here.
Yeah, I mean, I actually was phoned up about this by producer Peter Worsley, who's the producer on the film, and he had been stalking the Lennon estate for years, trying to get the rights to use this concert in a doc. This is a kind of mythical missing concert, I guess you would say. It's the only full-length concert that John did after the Beatles broke up, and of course the Beatles stopped touring in '66. So basically, between 1966 and 1980, this is the only concert he did, and it's in Madison Square Gardens. It's him in full great voice singing some of his most beloved and wonderful songs, and you really feel like he makes the joint rock. It's really a fun, great performance, and yet it never been seen because it was so badly filmed at the time, and even worse, recorded, very badly recorded, and it's only with modern sound technology people will be able to remix it. Sean Lennon has overseen a remix of the original things, and now you can hear it probably better than even people did back in 1972 if you were there at Madison Square Garden.
And I think, because there's been so many documentaries about both of these individuals before, you found a unique perspective, a unique way to enter into that conversation here alongside your co-director Sam Rice Edwards. And I'm curious to know specifically too with the audio call recordings. How you chose to incorporate those, because I love how they play out pretty much almost in full for the audience with the text on the screen. Even though we don't actually see any reenactments or anything like that, it's still just as riveting.
Yeah, that was an incredible treat to find those audio recordings because they make you feel like you're literally on the phone with John and Yoko,
Yeah.
and it's so intimate. And of course, this is them sort of not performing, not on for an interview or whatever. This is just like them in their everyday lives, and so you do feel like you're with them in a way that you can't in any other way. I actually nobody knew that those recordings existed, even in the Lennon estate, and then they found this box one day when I was halfway through editing. I kept saying to them, anything, if you find anything else from this period, they'd already given me all this home movie footage and all these other things, and one day they called up and they said, "Oh, we found this box. It says phone recordings, 1972. Are you interested?" And I'm like, "Of course I'm interested." So they send over hours and hours and hours of these audio recordings, and they're just wonderful and insightful. And I thought, how am I going to use these? And I'd already cut the sort of shape of the rest of the film, and then I just started placing them in, and they kind of spoke beautifully to the rest of the rest of the movie. I mean, I should say that it's a hard film to actually sum up in a few words, but
Hmm.
it's a kind of experiential collage movie held together by a narrative, which is about how did this concert, this sort of fabled missing concert, how did it come about? What was the emotional driver for that? And we kind of find out that it's a personal motivation, and it's a motivation that's about helping children, and it's not a political thing. It's not a kind of money-making thing. It's about their own feelings towards these disabled children at a school in upstate New York. And it's very beautiful and I think quite moving, particularly the John's rendition, of course, of Imagine, which is played over footage of these kids. And I think it's a very different, yeah, it's a very different experience for that reason alone, is that you really understand something about their emotional drive.
Absolutely. What about the audio recordings when you listened to them back? Was there like an element to them that surprised you?
I think with the audio recordings, it was really just about how compelling they are. I remember starting to listen to them on a long train journey here, a 3 hour train journey I took, and I had them on my phone, and I just downloaded them, and I was sort of agape, and the 3 hours went like that, and then I carried on listening to them all evening after that, and the next day, and because you just, I don't know how else to put it than to say that you just feel like you're in the room with them,
Yeah.
and they say all sorts of quite, personal and funny things. I mean, John is hilarious in them. That's the other thing.
Yeah.
He is so witty, so sharp, and so yeah, they sort of they give you the real the very the personal insight into this period. And I think what I realized only after I took on the film is that you could only make a movie like this about John, about this particular moment, like when he's arrived in America in late 1971, and then in 72, I'm sorry, early 73, they move to the Dakota building, the famous apartment block in New York, where outside of which he is going to be murdered in 1980. But it's that brief period when they first arrived. They're full of optimism and idealism, and they're engaged with the politics of 1971 and 72. They're trying to prevent Nixon being reelected, and they're casting around to find, what should we do with our lives now? John is thinking, I'm 31 years old. I've been in the biggest band of all time. I've written all these masterpieces. What do I do next? And that's the sort of moment you catch them. And in a way, you can also see the film as kind of being how he answers that question. How,
Hmm.
he trying to figure out, who am I? What do I do with the rest of my life?
And I think it's super important too to note that even though I think most, well, maybe not even most people, but for the average person, John Lennon is a name that even if you are a young Gen Z individual who hasn't even heard his music, you've heard the name. There's like a famous quality, a celebrity stardom to John Lennon
Mm.
that just goes
He's
cross
legendary.
generational. But what I really appreciate about your film was how you gave equal footing to both him and Yoko Ono in a way that the two just feel like complete equals here in terms of attention and the care that you give to both of them through your doc. So can you just tell me a bit about like having both of those personalities encompass this documentary for you?
Yeah, so it's no shock to people who know anything about this period and about John and Yoko, that Yoko was kind of reviled for a long time
Right.
because she was seen as the woman who broke up the Beatles. Of course,
Right.
completely nonsense. She talks about that in the documentary in one of these phone calls, and it's really shocking what she has to say actually. But she addresses that head on a couple of times. But you realize watching the film how much they are in each other's pockets. So they're each other's best friends, lovers, but also kind of creative sounding boards. They're singing together, they're making art together, they're doing, there's a codependency almost between them, I think. And one of my favorite moments in the film actually is at the end, after they've been through a lot of disappointment, a lot of things that haven't gone right politically and personally. They're looking for Yoko's lost child. Yoko has this child, which is a sort of subplot of the film, called Kyoko, who was kidnapped by her ex-husband in 1971, and they are looking for that child. They're sending out detectives around the country. They know she's somewhere in the US, but her name has been changed. They can't find her. And in fact, John never saw her again, and Yoko only re-met her 25 years later.
Hmm.
Um, but this is all going on. Sorry, I've lost track of what I was going to say. I went off on that detour about Kyoko. What was your question? Ask me
No, just
again.
well, basically, like you said, like she has not always had the same
Yeah,
reverence, let's say, amongst the general public because of that perception of how she broke up the Beatles and such. But it
yeah.
feels like your film like goes to great lengths to show just how important she was to John, and not only just that too, but also I feel like in a way, sort of basically like not so much like rehabilitate her image, if you will, but just like present her in the right context, in the right light for audiences today.
Well, I think that we tried very hard to humanize her, to make
Yeah.
people understand her as a person. And part of that is understanding emotionally where she's at. She's being blamed for breaking up the Beatles. Her child is missing.
Hmm.
Um, she's she's had been really very pretty successful, well-known conceptual artist at the very forefront of American art in the 60s. And now she's just known as John Lennon's wife who broke up the Beatles. And that I think was very difficult. She talks about that in the film. You know, they used to call me a witch and now I'm upgraded to a bitch. No, sorry, it's the other way around. I used to be a bitch, I'm now upgraded to a witch. And there's a very moving moment at the end of the film where she takes John to the first ever international feminist conference.
Hmm.
And John is the only man in the room. And then they vote, all the delegates vote as to whether John should be thrown out or not. And he's sitting there sort of laughing about it with her. And it always just makes me think, what an amazing thing for a man to do at that time. A sort of rock god, a macho guy. He goes to the first feminist conference. He wants to understand, he wants to learn, he wants to be a better person. And I think that's really compelling. And he's doing that for Yoko, who has explained to him what feminism is, who's explained to him how important it is. He
Yeah.
explained, this is why we are equal. And he really believes that they're equal. So yeah, he's the perfect boyfriend.
So, one-to-one Johnny and Yoko will be receiving an IMAX theatrical release. What led to that decision?
Well, I always wanted it to be a theatrical release because it is an experiential movie and it works fabulously and is very emotional, I think, on the big screen. But the film was seen by a man called John Turner, who's at IMAX, who runs that and runs their selection of movies. And he saw it and he said, "This would be amazing in IMAX." I'm like, "Yeah, but there's a lot of like Super 8 film and all sorts of stuff in here. And what's that going to look like?" And he said, "No, it's going to be fabulous." And we remixed it for IMAX, which, you know, the music never sounds better anywhere than in an IMAX theater. And and actually he was right. You know, by the time they'd done their magic on some of this very soft footage, it looks beautiful and it's totally immersive. You really feel you're at the concert during the concert sequences, and
Mhm.
you really feel you're with them in this little tiny apartment they're living in the West Village when you're listening to those phone calls or whatever. So yeah, I think that it's uh, um counterintuitively a film that really benefits from that treatment.
And I want to know too, like as you know, you have so much output across television, documentary, narrative feature film. I mean, it's like I can't imagine how many projects you're juggling at once usually. But I'm curious in regards to what makes you decide, oh, now is the time to tell a doc. Now is the time to do a narrative feature. Is it just a case of scheduling and timing, or is there like a choice that you make to make that happen?
A little bit of both. I mean, you know, if I had complete control over my own career, and none of us would do it and then do it because I love the contrast between them when you're fed up with being on a big set with 150 crew and difficult actors, and then you can go to a documentary where it's just you and an editor and two or three other people, and it doesn't matter if you sleep in that day, it doesn't matter if you throw away that bit of footage because it didn't cost very much. Whereas, you know, every day on a feature film is so stressful, so kind of, oh my God, if I didn't get it today, I'm never getting it. That sort of feeling. But at the same time, working on features and drama, you know, you get all the pleasure of collaborating with people with wonderful, you know, musicians and DPs and designers, and there's so much pleasure and fun to be had from that. So yeah, I would like to do both. I don't quite do one and then the other. I've done, you know, more or less. The balance isn't completely even. I'm doing it. I'm just starting work on a feature film at the moment, and that would be the next thing I do. Hopefully, be out mid next year.
I was actually going to ask you that to end here, what we could look forward to seeing from you next. Are you allowed to say, or is it under wraps?
It's something that's a bit under wraps,
Okay.
but it's a very different film for me. It's a kind of action thriller. It takes place in London, real time, and it's a pure piece of fun. And I think we live in a time where we all need a bit of fun.
Yeah. Yeah, sounds exciting to me. Well, thank you so much, Kevin, for your time here. I really, really appreciate it, and I hope everyone does go and check out One to One John and Yoko. Whether you're a fan of the two of them or not, you might learn something. It's had a long festival life, hopping around from Venice to Telluride to Sundance. So you've probably heard of it, but if you haven't, now's the time to check it out.
Thanks very much. Lovely
Thank
to
you.
talk to you, Matt. Bye bye.
Take care.